What if I told you that somewhere beneath the Florida Everglades, under snakes, sawgrass, mosquitoes the size of drones, and miles of unwalkable swamp, there may be a stone pyramid, not a mound, not a natural hill, not a tourist trap, a pyramid, along with a mile-long wall and a network of underground passages no one has been able to relocate, no matter how hard they've tried. And here's the part that should bother you. This wasn't discovered by TikTok explorers or fringe internet theorists. It was documented, mapped, and then quietly erased. Yeah, Florida. Not Egypt, not Mexico, Florida. And once you hear how it was found, and why no one talks about it anymore, things get uncomfortable. Fast. Alright, I'm gonna ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it for a second. Have you ever noticed how Florida is always treated like it doesn't really have a past? Like history just sort of starts when people show up with roads and air conditioning and bad decisions. Because here's the thing. There are parts of Florida that are so difficult to reach, so wet, so hostile, that even modern mapping barely touches them. And when people do wander into those places by accident, they sometimes come back with stories that don't fit the version of history we're comfortable with. This is one of those stories. Alright, let me set this up properly because this part matters. This story doesn't start with a tourist, or a thrill seeker, or somebody out on a fishing trip who got a little lost. It starts with a man named L. Frank Hudson, an explorer with archaeological training, riding into the Everglades as part of a surveying team that was literally there to decide what land could be developed and what couldn't. This wasn't fantasy. This was paperwork, measurements, maps, long days in heat and water, figuring out where roads and buildings might eventually go. Hudson knew what natural landforms looked like. He knew what erosion did. He knew the difference between something shaped by water and something shaped by hands. That's important, because when people later tried to dismiss what he reported, they always left that part out. At some point during that survey, the team pushed farther than planned. Weather shifted, equipment failed, and they ended up off route, deeper into Big Cypress than they were supposed to be. And if you've ever looked at a map of the Everglades, you already know how meaningless a map becomes once you're actually inside it. That's when Hudson noticed the ground changing. Not gradually, not in a way that felt natural. The slope was wrong, the angles were wrong, and when he climbed it, he realized he wasn't standing on higher land at all. He was standing on stone, not scattered rock, not shells, something built, something layered, something that looked to a trained eye uncomfortably deliberate, a pyramid, in the Florida Everglades. And what has always stayed with me about this isn't just what Hudson claimed to see, it's how carefully he wrote about it afterward. No wild language, no big conclusions, just letters, maps, and descriptions that read like a man trying very hard not to overstate what he knew he was looking at, which might explain why the story didn't explode. It just went quiet. And once you start following where Hudson said this thing was, and what modern scans now hint at in the same area, you begin to understand why a forgotten pyramid in a swamp might be easier to ignore than to explain. Section 3. The Hudson Expedition. The story no one prints. Here's the part most summaries leave out. Hudson didn't just stumble onto this thing alone. According to later correspondence, he was part of a small surveying team, engineers, a local swamp guide, and one pilot running aerial checks. And one afternoon, everything went wrong. A sudden storm rolled in. Visibility dropped to nothing. The airboat engine failed. They were stranded. No radio contact, no clear bearings. Just water, trees, and the sound of something moving where it shouldn't. They pushed inland on foot, trying to reach higher ground. And that's when the guide froze. Because rising out of the sawgrass was a stone slope. Too sharp, too symmetrical, too wrong. They climbed, and what they stood on wasn't land. It was architecture. Hudson knew immediately what the problem was. South Florida's ancient cultures were sophisticated. Yes, we know about massive shell rings, artificial islands, flood-resistant platforms, engineered canals older than Rome. But stone pyramids? That doesn't fit the approved story. No stone quarries, no documented stone building tradition. And when something doesn't fit the timeline, it doesn't get debated. It gets buried. There's a moment in every explorer's life when curiosity stops being harmless. For L. Frank Hudson, that moment came in the Everglades, not during some grand discovery, but during a job so routine it barely registered as history in the making. He was there with a surveying team, measuring land that might someday be drained, paved, and sold. clipboards, compasses, notebooks, the kind of work that doesn't expect surprises. Hudson had archaeological training. He'd spent years learning how landscapes behave over time. He understood erosion, sediment, flood cycles. He knew what Florida could do to land, and what it couldn't. That's why, when the team found themselves stranded deeper in Big Cypress than planned, something about the ground immediately unsettled him. It wasn't the height. It wasn't the shape at first. It was the feeling that the land was wrong. The slope rose too evenly. The angle didn't soften the way natural terrain always does. And when Hudson knelt and cleared away the muck with his hands, he felt something solid beneath the peat. Not shells, not packed dirt, stone. They climbed higher. The vegetation thinned, and what emerged wasn't higher ground. It was structure. Layered stone, stacked deliberately, with edges that resisted time in a way Florida never allows. Hudson didn't say pyramid out loud at first. He didn't want to be that person. But he knew. He knew because nothing in his training could explain what he was standing on, except human hands, working with intent, a very long time ago. Later, one of the team found what looked like a descending passage. It was partially collapsed, filled with water and snakes, and the air coming out of it smelled ancient. Hudson didn't go far. He didn't need to. He had already crossed the line from discovery into consequence. When the team finally made it back, Hudson did what he thought was the responsible thing. He reported it. Hudson mentioned something even stranger. Not the pyramid, the wall, nearly a mile long, running straight through swamp that should never allow straight lines. No natural process does that. Walls imply boundaries. Boundaries imply territory. Territory implies organization. So, let me ask you this, and drop your answer in the comments. If ancient people built a stone wall in the Everglades, what were they protecting? Or, what were they keeping out? Hudson wasn't alone. Over the decades, others reported similar things. Pilots spotting pyramid-shaped rises during droughts, surveyors noting straight embankments where none should exist, hunters finding stone beneath peat, then losing the spot forever. Some swear the shapes only appear when water levels drop. Others say the swamp moves, reclaiming anything uncovered, which is unnerving. Fast forward to now. LIDAR technology, the same tool that exposed lost Maya cities, starts scanning South Florida. And buried beneath vegetation, geometric terraces, linear formations, right angles in a place defined by curves. No one officially calls them pyramids, but no one explains them either. Every lost history story has a moment where one person sees something they were never supposed to see. For the Everglades Pyramid, that man was L. Frank Hudson, late 1960s, early 1970s, a time when Florida was still being surveyed, drained, mapped. Hudson wasn't a treasure hunter. He wasn't chasing aliens or Atlantis. He was a field explorer, methodical, obsessive, and deeply involved in documenting forgotten sites across Florida. And according to Hudson, someone took him into the swamp and showed him something that should not exist. Between 1970 and 1971, Hudson began circulating a series of private letters, not published papers, not press releases, letters, careful, quiet, almost nervous. In them, he describes a structure hidden deep within Big Cypress Swamp. He doesn't exaggerate, he doesn't romanticize, he simply calls it the Big Pyramid, not a burial mound, not erosion, a stone structure, stepped, geometric, and unmistakably artificial. And then Hudson drops a detail that makes every archaeologist pause. He says there were stairs descending underground, into passages filled with snakes, which, honestly, feels like Florida's official way of saying, you were not meant to find this. Carefully, professionally, without exaggeration, he wrote letters, he drew maps, he described measurements, materials, and location. He didn't claim aliens, he didn't claim Atlantis. He simply said there was a stone structure in the Everglades that did not belong there, and that it appeared vastly older than anything previously documented in the region. And that's when his life began to unravel. At first, the responses were polite, curious, then skeptical, then dismissive, then silent. Colleagues stopped returning his calls, institutions distanced themselves, funding dried up, invitations disappeared, and quietly, without any formal accusation, Hudson became a problem. A man who had seen something that complicated too many comfortable timelines, Word spread that he was unreliable, that he'd misidentified natural formations, that the swamp had gotten to him. The same man who had been trusted to help map Florida's future was now treated like a cautionary tale. And Hudson watched it happen in real time. He lost work. He lost standing. He lost the quiet respect of people who once nodded when he spoke. And all the while, he refused to recant. Not loudly, not angrily, just steadily. He continued to write, to document, to insist that what he saw was real. Friends later said that Hudson became quieter in his final years, not bitter, just careful, as if he'd learned that the truth, when spoken at the wrong moment, could cost you everything. There are no official records of what became of him after that. No public redemption. No late career vindication. Just a man who went to his grave carrying a certainty no one wanted to inherit. That in the heart of the Everglades, beneath water and roots and time, there is something built by hands we are not ready to acknowledge. And maybe that's the cruelest part of stories like this. Not that they might be wrong, but that sometimes, they're right. And being right comes at a price. So take a breath for a second, and just sit with all of this. We're talking about a guy who wasn't looking for legends. He was documenting Florida the way it actually is, muddy, half-mapped, and way older than the brochures make it seem. He writes letters, not manifestos. He sketches maps, not fantasies. And somehow, in the middle of one of the most inhospitable landscapes in North America, he's led to something that doesn't behave like nature, a shape that has edges, a rise that looks planned, stone where there shouldn't be stone. And it doesn't happen during some dramatic expedition funded by a university. It happens because a team gets stuck, lost, forced off their route. That's usually how these stories go, by the way. Not discovery, but accident. Then there's the wall, and I keep coming back to that. Because pyramids are strange enough, but walls mean intention. Walls mean someone cared where one thing ended and something else began. And in a swamp that actively erases straight lines, that should bother you a little. Years pass. Hudson keeps talking, he keeps asking, and instead of answers, he gets distance. The kind that doesn't argue with you. It just quietly moves you out of the room. Meanwhile, decades later, we develop technology that can see through trees, through vegetation, through time, and wouldn't you know it, shapes start showing up right where he said they would. Not clear enough to make headlines, not vague enough to ignore, just inconvenient. And that's where this story still lives, in that uncomfortable middle space where nothing is proven, but nothing is gone either. Look, I'm not saying there's absolutely a pyramid hidden in the Everglades. I'm just saying that if there were something down there, something old, deliberate, and capable of surviving while everything else sank, this is exactly how we'd lose it. Slowly, quietly, underwater, vegetation, and a whole lot of snakes. And maybe that's the most Florida ending imaginable. Hudson pushed too hard, asked the wrong questions, wouldn't let it go. And suddenly, funding disappeared, invitations stopped, his credibility dissolved. He wasn't debated, he was labeled difficult. And just like that, the Everglades pyramid vanished from respectable conversation. Today, independent researchers are quietly revisiting Hudson's work, matching his maps to modern scans, comparing notes to drought imagery. And here's the problem. Several anomalies line up exactly where Hudson said they would. Coincidence? Or proof that the swamp never forgot, it just waited. A ceremonial center, a lost culture erased by rising water, a marker, a signal, or something that challenges what we think early Americans were capable of. History doesn't disappear, it gets hidden. So, let's recap. A documented explorer, multiple letters, a stranded expedition, a stone pyramid, a mile-long wall, modern scans backing ancient claims, and a mystery that refuses to stay buried. I'm not saying there's definitely a pyramid in the Florida Everglades. I'm just saying, if there was a pyramid in the Florida Everglades, this is exactly how it would be forgotten. Underwater, undeniable, and surrounded by snakes. If you love stories that live in the cracks between history and myth, you're in the right place. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think this structure was. Like the video if this made you question the map. Subscribe for more forgotten places history would rather you ignore. because the world is full of oddities, and some of them are still watching from the swamp. I'm Noah Adams. This is Oddity Atlas.